class activities, I feel like if you get one, you have to do one of those like understand what happens to others who are going through this, or like something like that. I don't know. But like, because I enjoy group activities, I don't like to sit and listen all day, like in class and stuff. So
Okay.
I don't know. I think that it's not lecture. I approve.
Somebody suggested weekly journals. Might be hard to add that at this point because I can't change the grading. You don't always have to just be doing it for fun, and I doubt y'all would want to do that for fun. But it's a good suggestion that we might want to implement in the future when they offer this class at another time. I know we haven't done a good job about talking about the blog posts each week, and I know that may make you guys feel like why are we even doing this? I mean, talking about it when we get to class, and that's not my goal. But do you guys want to spend a couple minutes each week talking about how the blog posts? Would that be okay? I'm happy to do that. It's not a big deal. Let's talk about the stop giving us breaks and let us leave early. I'm happy to do that. That's what I was talking to Julie at the beginning of the semester. Do we give them a break or do we just let them leave early? She was like, one or the other, but not both. So that doesn't bother me at all. If the problem is if everybody starts like, I gotta go to the bathroom and I gotta go get a snack, and you're gone for 10 minutes, but we didn't have a break because we're continuing to do stuff, but you're gone. That's not very good. Unless you want to just shorten the break and we have it be like it's 5 minutes and then come back, and then we'll leave a little bit early too. I'm happy to do that. I'm getting a few nods. So shorter break and try to leave. And try to leave a few minutes early. Do the best with I can with that. Okay, anybody surprised with anything? Anybody else want to mention something?
I think softball articles was funny.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I wish I could do that. I didn't even take these articles. But I don't know. Do you have other classes where you have just articles, or do you have textbooks for all your other classes?
Books, articles, blog posts, teachers' dissertations.
I can't tell how you feel about that.
It's great.
I wasn't sure if people appreciated having only articles that changed each week versus having one big fat textbook where you just read a chapter every week. But it sounds like
more exciting.
Yeah.
yeah.
That is free. So that's really blessed.
True.
Yes.
I didn't know about that. Good call. Okay. All right.
Retweet.
Well, then if that's the case, what I'll start doing is giving us a little more time to talk about the blog at the beginning of class, shorten the break, and then try to leave us a little bit early. And then throw out the idea for whoever teaches the class next time about weekly journals. And then I'll try to come up with some activities. If I come up with activities, the only contingency is y'all have to participate. And no laughing or thinking that it's stupid. Okay? Perfect. Check. I wanted to just make sure that anybody that had questions about the 12-step project.
I'm having trouble getting to all three, and I know that's my fault. But a lot of them don't say online, and I know Mary Grace and I were like talking about it, like if they're open or if they're closed. And like I've shown up to one where it's closed, and I thought it was like because they just sometimes don't say open or closed on them, like online, like when you're finding them.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
Like I've shown up to two.
Yeah, but the NA one's really hard to find.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Has anybody found an open NA group that they went to? No?
I think it's called Friendship House. I went last year to one, and it's like off of West End. It's on 23rd. It's right like across the street from Coco's Cafe. But yeah, that one's open. I just walked in. Nobody has
I was
questions.
gonna say, if I remember correctly, Friendship House has them like every 30 minutes.
Yeah,
That's great. So you might just search under the groups for that particular location, and you might even be able to call and just say, looking for an open group. Or you might switch and go to an Al-Anon meeting instead, or an OA meeting instead, if you're having trouble with the NA specifically. Anybody else have Okay, I'm gonna talk about this journey within article. It's so short. And we're gonna just discuss it briefly. You don't have to, go ahead, you can pull it out if you want. I'm actually gonna read it to you out loud. And then I'm gonna draw something on the board and we're gonna talk about it together. But it's so short that I'm just gonna read it so you can follow along. Okay. I'll give you all a second if you're talking that. Spiritual deprivation. Wanting is the urge for the next moment to contain what this moment does not. When there's wanting in the mind, that moment feels incomplete. Wanting is seeking elsewhere. Completeness is being right here. Stephen Levine. We reached out to people, places, and things and thought we would feel better. And that worked for a while. When that stopped working, some of us discovered alcohol or drugs, food, work, sex, or other addictions or dependencies. We reached out for more and felt better and wanted more and knew that was it. That made us feel better. That made us feel as good as, or as attractive as, or as smart as, or whatever we needed to feel that we didn't. For many of us, it worked for a long, long time. When it stopped working, we tried new things or different things or more of the same things. We tried changing scenes and friends and marriages and partners and sometimes towns and states and countries. We used our drinks and our pills and our food and our relationships to help us feel good if we felt bad, or better if we felt good. We used them for everything, even after they stopped working for us, because we didn't know how to stop doing what we were doing. We didn't think we could stop because we thought our problem was everything else but our addictions. We thought our problem was everything but ourselves. We thought it was all those people, places, and things. We never knew how to take responsibility for our lives. We never had grown up. As we choose to turn to those dependencies as a solution to feel better, we were actually making a choice away from growing up, away from maturity, away from taking responsibility for our own lives. All that reaching out to find our happiness gave us moments of satisfaction that didn't last. It was as if we had a big empty hole in the middle of our stomachs that needed constant filling to feel good. If we put alcohol or drugs or food into it, it would feel good and there would be no pain. We would numb all of those feelings of guilt and discomfort and insecurity, or we turned to other people to take responsibility for our happiness. We didn't know who was living inside us. When we give up those dependencies, that big hole begins rapidly to be filled with pain, fear, resentments, guilt, doubt, pride, anger, self-pity. And we think, if I feel this bad, who needs it? Here we were in this new and frightened state. We finally admitted that we were powerless over our addictions. Super depressing, isn't it? So, I'm going to draw the big empty hole. List out to me things people fill that big empty hole with. Money.
Alcohol.
Sex.
Approval. What else?
Their parents. Oh,
Did you say
appearance. Like
I
their looks.
was sitting there thinking, did she mean? Sorry.
No.
Religion.
about really adrenaline rushing experiences. You know what I'm saying? Risk? Yeah, risky.
Exercise.
Can you identify with any of that yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's real easy when you talk about addiction to think about it as somebody else's problem, if it's not anything that you've ever struggled with. And unless you start to think of what addiction really means, anything that you fill up yourself with that you continue to need a craving for, and you have a higher tolerance every time you need more and more of it, that meets similar understandings, right? So I may not have an addiction to alcohol, but I may go out and blow all my money every weekend at the mall, buying stuff I don't need, and then not being able to pay my mortgage because I just bought something really big. So I want us to just remember that when we're thinking about addictions, because sometimes it's easy to just think that's not my problem, and so you just start tuning other people out that struggle in that way. I wanted to give you guys this, I went to the, Association of something in Addictive Medicine, I can't remember what it stands for, to look up really clear definitions of addiction. So I'm gonna pass this out to you, but before I do, you guys tell me how you would define addiction. What's it mean to you? Not like some big social working definition. What's it mean to you?
To have it, and I would say obsession, which is so. Never mind. I have to reprocess things.
Having like one thing is like the epitome of your universe, pretty much.
Okay. What else?
Like a dependency on that thing to always come through for you.
Anybody else?
I would say a disease that has a certain amount of control on your life.
I'm gonna give you these. This is like super scientific and probably more than you wanted to know, but I think it's good for us to have kind of a basis by what we were talking about. Similar, y'all are using kind of similar vocabulary. I was gonna bring my DSM-5 and read to you some of the substance use and it's just so cumbersome, I didn't want to do that. And because this class really isn't, let's talk all about addictions, that's not what this class is about. We're talking about spirituality as it impacts addictions. So I figured we don't need to go into the depths of definitions, but I wanted you to have something to go from. So this is the short definition from this Americans, I can't remember, Addictive Medicine website, which goes with what Isabel was saying. Addiction is a primary chronic disease of the brain, reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. So it's about reward and relief with something, right? Something that you're focused on. And some of the bigger criteria in DSM are talking about withdrawal and tolerance. So if you don't do it or have it or use it, you feel something happen to you, and you need more and more of it to receive the same sort of high. That's the tolerance. So we're going to see that in this story that we're going to watch here in a little bit, and then I'm sure you've seen that in other situations that you've been in. Would anybody be willing to kind of share a story of your own from, not your own, but maybe an encounter you've had with a family member or a friend or a client regarding addictions, and maybe something you learned from it?
I have a client right now that has been an alcohol abuser and drug abuser pretty much his entire life, and he just realized that he has liver failure from all of this, and now is seeking help. And I've seen it tore his family, like his 2 daughters, because he's 57, and never was in their lives, and like they're trying to get help for him, but now they're like, nope, we're not helping you, Dad. Like, you never were in our lives. Like, they were and now not, and it's like, I think it's triggers for the girls, like, our dad never grew up with us. Why help him now since he never, like, he left us pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's to see how it can tear a family apart.
And that, that goes down to, like, at the very bottom it says addiction is characterized by usually A, B, C, D, E things, and the D is diminished recognition of significant problems with one's behaviors and interpersonal relationships. So this idea that it's destroying my relationships with other people, and I don't see that as a reason why I need to do anything about it. So, yeah. Anybody else?
My sister type person. She's kind of lived with us on and off for 7 years. Her mom was a meth user, and that's when she started living with us. And like, now that she's back with her family and everything, because she kind of just went off the deep end and cut us off, and we cut her off, and it's just a whole big thing. But it was like one of those situations where it was so sad to see, because her mom constantly would like, so she has 11 kids with 4 different people, and she's like, for each of them, it's amazing that like the kids have turned out as well as they have while she's been using. And when now she's at the point where like my sister is pregnant and has she just had her kid, and her mom's stealing like her food stamps and then giving away like her EBT card to get money for other things. And it's just one of those things like that, watching that for the last 7 years is just what kind of like pushed me in the direction of social work, like fixing those types of situations or just like helping those types of situations. And it was just like a whole crazy experience to see, because she was just like, because it was her family, and that's just kind of like her culture. They're just very like defensive of each other, and we're over here like, LaShonda, come on now, go with it.
Yeah. Kind of unable to even see the impact that it's having on everybody else. Anybody else have an example there?
My uncle is an alcoholic, and I think I just like didn't know, I guess, kind of the spectrum that it could be on, because in my head, like, a man who's an alcoholic was always someone who like was an abuser to like their family, or like someone like on the streets who like doesn't like have anything, and he is like a well-off guy and like has a family and like has never hit like kids, and like is just super loving and like willing to party. And so like that was just really weird when my mom like sat me down and told me, because I was like, but he's such a great man, like, and it's just crazy to think that like I just had this perspective of like they're only like this if like these other things are going on. So yeah.
There's a lot of functional alcoholics out there. You'd be totally surprised that they, drinking at home in the closet, away from everybody else. And it's so hard. Anybody else have something that strikes them?
I've had like on a, I guess not common, but like since I've been in college, I've met a few people who have like expressed like an addiction to like pornography and things like that. And it kind of goes back to like what you were saying about if you're not aware or like you've never had struggles with that kind of thing, then you don't really know that that's a thing. And so, like when my friend told me about it, I was just like, I was just like shocked, because I didn't know that people were addicted to that. It was like, all I heard about is like, oh, you're addicted to this drug, or like you're an alcoholic. And like, I didn't think that people were addicted to that. So it just really like blew my mind. And it was interesting just to listen to how, like, especially like hearing it from people who are Christian, and like that battle that they face with dealing with that, it was just really like mind blowing to listen to.
It's crazy to know that way more prevalent than we think. in a lot of addictions that nobody wants to talk about it, least of all at church. Have y'all, so Celebrate Recovery, you heard of Celebrate Recovery? Anybody? Nobody? Wow. Okay, well, if you get a chance, look up Celebrate Recovery. It's like a Christian adaptation of AA and NA and all the 12 steps. But they offer it at a lot of churches. I've never actually sat in on a group before, but they have groups for people addicted to porn, people addicted to drugs, alcohol, I think all the equivalents of other 12 steps that we talked about, and they offer those groups at different churches all around town. So, if you're just curious, and it'd be a good place to refer some of your friends if they don't want to go to other kinds of 12 steps and are insistent that they want to go to a faith-based program, a specifically faith-based program, then that's an option. Well, let's transition just slightly into that Gardner chapter on telling secrets. It's pretty short. I hope y'all have this is when you read, right? I'm always afraid I read something that didn't read. As soon as this class is over and I have a little bit more time, I'm buying this book and reading it. I know that Lauren said she loves this book, and I have another friend who was like, this is the best book ever. So, I know y'all don't have time to read extra books, but if you ever do, I'm sure this would be one to add. Let's talk about some of the things that you guys liked about this part, and especially if any of you guys have been able to attend one of your 12-step groups yet, if you found any application for what you're reading and what you saw happening in the group. Does that make sense?
I just found it interesting that when you started talking about like how like the positivity behind it. It's like when you were talking about like prayer and meditation, like helping books, helping each other. Because I like, especially when thinking about groups about like these AA groups and stuff like that, there's never like you never like, especially in like movies and stuff, it's not really portrayed as like a positive place almost. Like some of them are like, I've watched this movie over the weekend, over fall break, I forgot what it was called. But they were in an AA meeting and like they're laughing and joking and stuff like that. Like you typically, when you think about an AA meeting, it's like there's like a negative connotation almost. Like this is like a very serious place, like it's not like there's no room for that kind of stuff. So like just to hear about this, they're laughing and praying and like doing all that stuff, like setting a good positive atmosphere, which is really
I know from people that I've talked to, like family members or friends of family, like AA meetings, like some of them go to it even though like they've surpassed like their 12 steps or whatever. Like they go back to just support them, like because it's kind of a bond that you have to have. Like I know my uncle goes back for like an accountability for himself. He goes every single day, like for it, even though he's been sober for say 5 years now or something. Like he just goes back still every single day.
Yeah.
Like it's
Absolutely. I think that that's such an important part, because people are continuing to work the steps, and you'll hear that, well, we're still working the steps. And if they have a relapse, which is expected in addictions, right, then you're working the steps again. On page 90, at the beginning, it just says, in one sense, they are strangers who know each other only by their first names and almost nothing else about each other. In another sense, they're best friends who little by little come to know each other from the inside out instead of the other way around, which is the way we usually do it. They don't know each other's biographies, but they know each other's frailties, failures, and fears. I love that. You know? The idea that you could walk into a room and I can just be Rebecca. Nobody knows anything else about me, what I do for a living, anything about my family, except the fact that I struggle with whatever it is that I'm in the room. And that everybody sitting in the room with me has the same struggle. And there's something about what that feels like, right? And I also like the fact that it said they do not give each other advice. Have you all been able to go, has anybody gone to one of their groups yet? Yeah. Did you notice that? That they don't give each other advice?
Yeah, I was kind of like sat there and just like told about how, you know, their week's been, and like this one lady is having issues with some insurance thing or something. So this other guy was talking about how he deals with all his own like healthcare and he doesn't go through like an insurance company and all sorts of stuff. So then they all like started sharing about like their own like healthcare experiences. And then like it was kind of rewarding because like everybody was just, you know, sharing about random healthcare experiences they've had. And then like this guy who didn't even introduce himself, he just kind of came in and sat in the corner quietly. Like at the end, he opened up and was like, "Hey, I'm so and so, and I'm just here to get a new start." And then that's all he said. So it was like kind of cool to hear them all just like, you know, share these completely like random things that had nothing to do like about their addiction or anything, and then just watch this guy kind of like come out because he saw like how like easy breezy it was.
Yeah. Vulnerability, right? Have you all ever been in a small group or even a classroom small group or something in your background where you felt that level of vulnerability right away? Yeah?
I did it's like a year-long thing with the orientation program at Beaumont. And so the first thing that we do, there's like 10 students, and the first thing that we do is we go on a retreat, and like everybody tells their life story, and it takes like hours and hours because people go into like a lot of detail, and like for a lot of those people that was the first time, you know, we'd known each other, some of us, and some of us hadn't known each other at all, and then it was just this like pretty instant bond, which was good because it prepared us for everything else that we would go through that year. And so it's not, I know that doesn't always work, but it really worked for us. And like I, as a just person, I guess, am not like a huge fan of small talk. Like I find it exhausting, and so to be able to just like skip that part of it and like to get to know people from the inside out was amazing. So.
Anybody else have an experience like that? Right down from what I was reading on page 90, it says, in other words, they tell each other their secrets. And as you listen to them, you hear, among other things, your own secrets on their lips. I just thought, like, you get me, you know? My friend that's going to come next week, we've been friends for a really long time, and she let me go to one of the meetings that she goes to with her. And we walked out, and we got to her car, and I was like, man, you are never going to stop going to these. You have to keep coming to these. And she was like, you really think so? She's going to tell you some of her story and her struggles with the 12 steps. I was like, oh my word, it's life-changing. I want to come to this group every week, and I didn't have this problem. Just because everyone was so warm, accepting, loving, you all get each other in ways that this is how the church should be. And that's what the rest of the article, I thought, I wanted to hear y'all's perspective on that. Do you think the church that you go to, or the church that you grew up in, acts like that? Loving each other's vulnerabilities, struggles, I'm getting those.
From our church, just because we're very like open in everything. Like we've been kicked out of so many like Southern Baptist conventions over like the last 2 years, just because of how open we are. And so when it comes to that type of stuff, like I just know personally that like my church would be like incredibly accepting. And honestly, like it surprises me that they don't already have like AA meetings meeting there and everything, which that's like totally something that's like up their alley.
You should tell them to start with. Anybody else?
I Growing up, I grew up in a massive church, a Baptist church back up north, and it is totally different going from like a large church to now we go to a congregation of like 60, and knowing like that everyone knows everyone's business kind of things, but it's in a good way. Like when something goes wrong, everyone's able to be vulnerable about that and like their struggles. Like I know someone had come out and said that they were an addict to something that none of us knew, like kind of like your uncle, like you just never would expect it. And something like, I don't know if it's just congregation size or just like the people that you surround with that really affect it. Well, it's probably both. But it was really interesting, like growing up at the big church that I went to, like you didn't even know who was on the other pew next to you, like you just didn't, and there was a school affiliated with it, so it was like so much. And I feel like a lot of churches just like will sweep it under, like they want the, I guess I'm speaking for myself, they want this pretty persona, like they'll say that they want it, but when you really get messy, they honestly don't want to do it, from my experiences. Like when you get to the nitty gritty stuff, like they kind of are shameful of you.
That reminds me of Cheap Grace, which is like a series from Bonhoeffer, and I was like just talking to someone about this. But I had like a very similar experience where I was raised in like a mega church, and like coming here and being able to like pick a church and like how it be like more intimate, like I just loved that, and like I felt like it was more real about like we are struggling with stuff and like this is okay and like this is how we're gonna deal with it together. Whereas like back home, you always like hear someone's story about how they're saved and like, and their life's perfect now, and like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but it's not, because it never will be. Like, there's still struggles. So,
Yeah. What do y'all think? On page 93, he's talking about the church again, just going with what you guys were just talking about. It says, but I believe that the church has an enormous amount to learn from them. I also believe that what goes on in them, talking about 12 steps, is far closer to what Christ meant his church to be than what it originally was, than much of what goes on in the churches that I know. These groups have no buildings or official leadership or money. They have no rummage sales, altar guilds, or every member canvases. They have no preachers, choirs, liturgy, or real estate, no creeds, no programs. They make you wonder if the best thing that could happen to many a church might not be to have its building burned down and lose all its money, and all that the people would have left to be God and each other. You don't think that?
When I read that really spoke to me, just because I grew up in a small church, but it wasn't like there wasn't that like good kind of vulnerability in it. Like I don't really know what came first, whether it was like people were kind of more judgmental, or if like my family, because my family just doesn't really like share what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if my family just didn't feel comfortable with that vulnerability first, or if there was like the judgment. So, but both things were present, and so it was just kind of not a good situation. Right, like as far as like the whole church went, there was like a school attached to it, they called it like the Shepherd School, but like pastor training school. And it was all very small, very, very small. And I think like my family ended up leaving the church after I came to college here. And I think the reason was because like there was no focus on like the congregation at all. And barely, as it kind of turned out, barely any focus on God. It was all on this like pastor school. And I think like our pastor even said at one point something to the congregation around like, oh well, the school's like this is the priority or something like that. And it was just really like uncomfortable. So reading this was just like spoke super true to just like what the kind of church that I grew up in. It was awesome just to think about that.
Absolutely. I think it's hard. I thought about my church in relationship to that, and thought, I think there almost has to be a culture started by the leadership of the church that emphasizes the importance of vulnerability and honesty from the top down, in order for people to feel like in a small group setting that I can be vulnerable with you if you're vulnerable with me, because everybody knows that being vulnerable is the way to, like, that if nobody's modeling that for anybody else, then why would I tell you my secrets?
It's funny because I read this and like I've heard like I've heard the like similar things about mega churches and like how they're very disconnected. But like the church I grew up, I was literally not literally born there, but like I've been there since I was infant, and like our church is like, it started off as a small church, but now it's a mega church. And so the thing that I admire like just about our pastors, like my congregation, is that they never left that small church mentality. So like even though there's like thousands of people that go to the church,
Is this going?
they have that same mentality of like family and like vulnerability. Even our pastor, like he's very vulnerable when he preaches. Like he talks about like his struggles, and he talks about like those things.
Yeah.
And like I used to have a bias because like I've been at the church so long, like I work in ministry, so like I'm very like and we have vulnerable conversations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then like to talk to other people like within the congregation, we're like, yeah, like it's a mega church, but like, you know, I feel like I'm a part. Like I feel like I don't feel like I'm just like a pawn or a piece.
Right.
So
Yeah. I think it can be both, right? And the hope would be that there's a culture amongst most churches, that would be the hope, ideally, that they're exemplifying honesty and vulnerability. I remember, I'm reading a book with some people at our church, and it was about sex and sexuality in the church. And one of the examples that it gave was this young girl who had an addiction to porn, and she came to one of the pastors of the church asking for help. She was staying on the worship team, and she was giving her story in the book, and she said that when she went to the pastor to tell him that she needed help and wanted accountability, and that he kicked her off the worship team and told her she shouldn't come back to the church. And it just, my heart sank when I read it. One, because he's her pastor. Oh my word, I couldn't believe it. And two, as a social worker, I was like, no, she's basically asking you for help, and you just slapped her in the face for an addiction that, as a woman talking about porn, that's huge. It's more common for you to hear that men are struggling with porn, like you said, Price, but to say a Christian single woman struggling with porn and was asking for help and got the slap in the face by her pastor. And she wasn't blaming him. It was so interesting. She wrote back, and she was writing and said, I don't think it's his fault. And I read it and I'm like, I think it's his fault, But I thought, how damaging is that to her, not only with her addiction, but to her faith, right? And to her impression of the church and their honesty and willing to help people that are struggling. Do you think she's ever going to go to another pastor and say, I'm struggling with porn and I really need some help? Come on. No. And I think that's kind of I hope that connects for you guys, this interaction of spirituality and addiction, because I think if we are people that aren't willing to see that there's an interplay, right, between, some people believe that God causes the addictions, right? And if you just had faith, you could get over it. I've heard people say that. Some people believe that it's caused by a curse, the addictions could be caused by a curse, or God's punishing you. So in your practice, you may hear a lot of beliefs that are conflicting to yours, and that may push all your buttons about what you think God does or doesn't do. But I think this understanding that addiction looks different. And I might even challenge you, push yourself to see if you had to say to somebody, I have an addiction, could you name it? Could you say what you're addicted to? Even if it's not one of the big ones, whatever that would be. What do you do when you're lonely? What do you do first thing when you're sad or mad? Just so that when you're sitting face to face with somebody who struggles with something you don't struggle with, you can then put up, be able to be empathic. Does that make sense? If you don't think, oh man, that person's crazy, I can't believe they struggle with that. Obviously, that's a terrible attitude to have when you're a social worker. But if you can say, yeah, they struggle with that just like I struggle with this.
that at least gives you the ability to be empathic towards them. Is there anything else from this Buechner article that you loved or wanted to say something about?
I really love on page 92 when it says stop trying to protect, to rescue, to judge, to manage the lives around you.
Yes.
Because that is just what you're powerless to do. Remember, at the lives of people are not your business, they're their business. They're God's business because they all have God, whether they use the word God or not. Even your own life is not your business. It is also God's business. Leave it to God.
Yeah.
I just think I wrote it.
Yeah. I got a big highlighting and a big star, and I mean, how many times do we do that? I mean, that's basically, if you haven't gone to an Al-Anon meeting, that's what they're going to talk about, codependency and rescuing other people. Even if you're not, you know, it's a mom thinking about wanting to rescue her son who's addicted to whatever. But the idea that I can fix your life because you can't fix it, but I can fix it for you. And I'm going to like micromanage you until I fix you because that's my job. And that turns into its own addiction, right? People, approval, so many other things. Yeah.
I think that's along with this. When I went to the AA meeting last year for another class, I was almost like uncomfortable with how someone would speak, and then that would be it, and then the other person would just start speaking, and I would like see this person weeping and be like, wait, we need to talk to her, or like let's talk about this. But I mean, like it says, let it go, and like let that be handled with her and their higher power, like God, and like not make it a discussion because it's like all about being there on your own and volunteering whatever information you want and that being great and like that being yours and like not up for grabs. Which I think that's just like I've never been in that situation where someone talks and they're like, well, this happened to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the same thing happened to me.
completely different.
I turned to my friend afterwards. I was like, nobody told that lady how to fix that problem. And she was like, that's the whole point, Rebecca. You don't give advice. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. And then I thought, but then I do, you know? Because in the same way with social work practice and clinical work, like if you ask me for advice and I always give it to you, then you'll never learn to figure it out on your own. You're always going to come to me because you think I have all the answers. And that's the whole point. Yeah, then you'll become dependent on me. You think I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and I'm not. You know, instead I need to say, well, what do you think? Not because I'm trying to deflect and I don't want to give you any answers, but because I know you can come up with just as good an answer as I can. And that's important. Yeah. Okay. Briefly, if you'll pull up that last article, we're not going to talk, it's really fat. The 12 steps, the introduction, and then the Bill Wilson account. How many of you read that and then thought at each moment when you got to Bill's story, I'm not gonna, not the doctor's opinion, but were you frustrated at all with Bill's story? Keep thinking, surely this is the last time he's gonna do this. Surely he's not gonna mess up again. Did you find that when you read it? Anybody? Did you read it? Was there anything that struck you about Bill's story? We're going to watch Bill's story, so that's why I don't want to talk about this for a long time. But if there was something briefly that struck you, I want to address it before we watch it. Anybody? I think the part that struck me was just every time him thinking that it was about his own willpower to stop. This time I can do it because I'm strong enough this time, and then something happens and he relapses again. And this time I'm going to do it for my wife, and then he relapses again. And this time I'm going to do it for the doctor, and then he relapses again. And then that friend of his that came to him said, I got religion. And he didn't really want to listen to him, which I thought was funny. Well, we'll talk about the rest of this and as it relates to the movie that we're going to watch after we're done. I am going to, I think I have it set up to just start. I hope you'll stay awake and put your laptops away so that you're not distracted. No, you don't have to take notes. I just want you to watch. I'm going to erase this. And then I'm going to, I'm going to write a few questions over here that I want you to watch for examples of so we can talk about it briefly when we're done. This will take us almost to, do you guys want to go to the bathroom real quick before it starts?
Yeah, just a water.
Okay.